right, thanks, Mark. I'm gonna start off by sharing my screen. And then Mark, if you could just let me know, because I really won't be able to see anybody in the full screen mode, but can you just make sure that you're able to see my slides?
Sure, yes, I can see it.
Okay, great. So hello, everyone. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you might be around the world. Thank you for allowing me into your homes, as we're all pretty much resident these days. As Mark said, my name is Joe Vallone. I am an SBCT and SAFE Fellow with Scaled Agile. And I've been with Scaled Agile for about 6 years in October, I think, is how long I've been there. So I've been with them for a while. I was an SBCT before then. What do these acronyms mean, and why does it matter? The SBCT stands for Safe Program Consultant Trainer. So many people who take an implementing SAFE class will pass the exam and become SPCs. As SPCs, you pretty much teach everything that is available to you from the SAFE platform. Except for the implementing SAFE class. On the implementing SAFE class, you need to be an SPCT to teach that. And as Mark will tell you, or as I can tell you, it's a pretty arduous process to go through, and it takes a while to complete. And there's a lot of steps in that process. SPCTs have been recognized by Gartner as experts in the SAFE community, meaning they said in one of their recent documents, they said, hey, if you're going to hire an SPC, great, you probably want to interview them and see what their experience is. If you end up hiring an SPCT, you don't need to interview them. They're already pre-qualified. Because there's a lot of work that it takes. SAFE Fellows are ones that contribute to the content of the Scaled Agile framework. And one of the areas that I contribute to is largely in the portfolio area. And I wrote the guidance article, the advanced guidance article on innovation accounting. And so that's what I'm going to talk to you about today. I've been doing the lean and agile thing for a while. I started with agile extreme programming back when I was working with Borland. And then went through and worked for several different companies. I spent a lot of time working for Nokia in the mobile handset division. That's where I met Dean Leffingwell, the creator of SAFE, and that's one of the complex organizations that I've been involved in to do an entire SAFE transformation. That's also been American Airlines and several other areas. So what problem do we want to solve here? Well, the main problem we want to solve is the issue that we're having is it's very difficult to evaluate the profitability of large initiatives. And I'm just going to go ahead and mute. Okay. Make sure we got everybody. All right. So from the aspect here, it's very difficult because most traditional evaluation methods that we use, ROI mechanisms, they're not really designed to handle complex systems. They're designed in a different age for manufacturing, and they were all designed decades ago. Some of them maybe 100 or more years ago, and things have changed since then. Here's the other issue. Businesses require, albeit now demand, agility. Traditional financial metrics that I just mentioned that are based on discounted cash flow analysis, they're just insufficient. They don't measure risk well, they don't measure returns well, and they fail to take into account the complexity of the systems that we're currently building in the 21st century. These were all metrics that were created a long time ago. I think NPV, net present value, was invented in the 1920s. So like I said, way out of date. Business agility requires that we focus on not just IT, but we focus on the entire enterprise. And that's really how we attain business agility. Think of it this way. if you spend your time and you get IT, let's say you get IT very lean and agile, that's great. But if the business can't take advantage of that, it's fairly useless. So what SAFe does is it takes a whole product view, a system view that says, okay, yeah, sure, we could optimize IT over here, but we can only move as fast as the slowest component. And optimizing, making IT lean and agile doesn't really help the rest of the organization. And the rest of the organization only makes sense if they can leverage that speed of development and delivery. So what does that mean? Well, in our area, in our SAFe area, in our business area, there is going to be other areas besides development. Finance needs to be part of this. Human resources needs to be part of this. Marketing, legal, HR, all these are part of the enterprise and are necessary to become lean and agile in order for us to get the greatest return on our investments. So to do that, SAFe talks about 7 core competencies in business agility. So mastering the 7 core competencies means you master business agility. How did we come up with this? Well, when we started doing our research, what we found was if you brought 100 agilists in a room from many different types of frameworks and areas, from lean, from agile, and you ask them what business agility is, you'll get about 100 different answers. So each one will have their own idea. So we went to the SAFe community and we tested out some hypotheses and got some data. And we came up with these 7 core competencies. Now, the main one that we're going to focus on is up here in business agility, in lean portfolio management as part of business agility. So we're going to be talking about that. Why? Well, the traditional approaches that we've used in the past, project management, is insufficient for what we're trying to do. What we really need to do is manage our portfolios. And as this says, traditional approaches to portfolio management, they're not really designed for the 21st century. These activities came from a different time, a different era. They're not available to take advantage of the fast feedback that we have for the lean. And when we try to look at these things and we try to do the strategy and the planning, and there's real no place where this fits in a traditional agile lean development. So we incorporated that into SAFe in three areas. And those are strategy, investment funding, lean governance, and agile portfolio operation. These are these 3 areas that make the most sense to us. Strategy and investment funding. So that's really, what are we going to invest in? Lean governance, which is also around the idea of high assurance and compliance and reporting. You know, we have SOX compliancy here in the US. We have, if you're a bank, there's the Dodd-Frank bill. There's a number of different types of laws that we have to maintain. And that goes double if you're in other high assurance areas like healthcare or banking or areas of airline transportation. They have additional compliance things that they have to deal with as well. Agile portfolio operations. This is where you'll find maybe your lean agile center of excellence or your agile portfolio. Your agile PMO as well, that helps work with it. So we may specify the funding up here, and this may support our strategy, but actually managing our returns, managing the flow actually takes place down here at the bottom of this triangle between lean governance and agile portfolio operations. This is not individual people. These are groups of people that have to cooperate and work together. So having said that, then let's define what is a SAFe portfolio. What is a SAFe portfolio for us? A SAFe portfolio is really nothing more than a collection of value streams, okay? Value streams are very simply the steps involved in producing your solution from ideation to the very end. And there's two areas here. There's an operational value stream, and that's up above, and that talks to how does your company make money? How are they driving profits? What types of solutions are they producing, and how are the consumers, our customers, how are we consuming them? In this case, we're concentrating on the development value stream, which you have an operational value stream, you have the systems that support the operational value stream, and then you have these development value streams, which are the development teams that build these systems. And so really when we start talking about focusing on the development value stream, the development value streams are really geared towards helping us develop the solution. And the steps in those processes are typically fairly straightforward. So those value streams will look like design, build, test, release, or deploy, or something along those lines. Value streams are repetitive. They happen over and over and over again. It's not a business process in the sense that it doesn't fork or branch. There are sequential steps. So it's a real straightforward way. This is not new, by the way. Lean has been doing value streams. If anybody out there is Six Sigma, I mean, this is basic. This is stuff that's been around for 5 or 6, maybe longer decades of how Lean operates. So value streams are not something that was invented by SAFe. It's something that we use. Value streams were invented by the Lean movement and made popular by people like Karen Martin and Mike Osterling and folks like that. But it's only been, they were developed originally for hardware manufacturing flow, and now we're developing these things and using them as part of our overall systems as well. Solutions are delivered to the customer. We only consider things, we practice good DevOps, and we only consider things released when the customer is actually consuming them. So as you noticed in this slide here, this slide here, the customer is at the center of everything we do. So based on this, we want to make sure that really we're not calling it released until the point where the customer is actually consuming it, okay? So this is how we define a safe portfolio. Now, from your perspective, from sort of the 50,000-foot view, it might be easiest to think about this as, okay, we have this very large enterprise, and out of this large enterprise, I have these different business units, or perhaps their divisions. It's the easiest way to think about it is really each division probably has a set of products and services. To us, that's a portfolio. So there is a product and services, and those products and services are developed across a operational value stream. Those teams that do the development work are in the development operating system, the development value stream that is producing that work for the enterprise or that division, as the case may be, to sell. Okay, so here you might have the case of a small enterprise. So small enterprise might just have a single safe portfolio. No problem with that whatsoever. A larger enterprise, a company like IBM, or your FedEx, or your Nike, or your Boeings, or your Airbuses, they have lots of different divisions. They have lots of people. We're talking 100,000. Some of our customers have 250,000 to 300,000 people in there. Those are big, large enterprises, and they will have multiple safe portfolios because they have multiple lines of business, multiple business units or divisions. So you could have a simple case of a single portfolio, or you could have a case where there's multiple portfolios available. Okay, so when we start talking about the portfolio and we start talking about our strategy and investment decisions, we use the same model that Mackenzie uses, as well as popularized by Jeffrey Moore in his book Escape Velocity, which talks about these various horizons. So real brief explanation, the Mackenzie model talks about 4 different horizons. Horizon 0 are investments that we're using to decommission, because if you wanted to decommission something, say like a data center, it is going to cost money. There might be contracts involved. We might have to move some assets around. So decommissioning things is sunsetting them happens, and it's typically not for free. On the other hand, we have this Horizon 1, which is subdivided into investing and extracting. So if we took a simple example, let's say Uber, okay? So long time ago, Uber built a platform where people could use an app and they could call a car. And so they made their investments in the platform and the technology. And now they're extracting that information. Now they've already invested the money, and now they're extracting the money. People are paying, they're using this platform. Sure, we're still investing in this platform. We're making it efficient. Maybe there's a new feature here and there that we add, but primarily we're here. This is what Uber concentrates on. Horizon 1 is our cash cow. That's our main line of business. And for Uber, that's people hailing rides via an app. Horizon 2. These are smaller investments, but these are things that are emerging technologies, things that are not making us money today, but we see they're out there in the future. So for Uber, this would probably be autonomous self-driving cars. Uber Eats would still be over here. I think that was partly an acquisition. But the more advanced cases of, well, we want self-driving cars. Why? Well, our biggest expense are the people. So if we can eliminate the people, that would eliminate a big expense, and people would drive autonomously and hopefully more safely and reliably. That remains to be seen, but those are the emerging ones. Horizon 3 are lots of smaller investments because we're kind of seeing where this is. This is we're evaluating new technologies, new things. For Uber, this might be the experiments that they've been running around Los Angeles about having a drone that'll carry people. So it's it doesn't have a pilot. It's an autonomous drone, and it's low altitude. It kind of eliminates the need to sit in traffic on 101 or what the other, Ventura Freeway or whatever some of those famous highways are in Los Angeles, where people just sit there for hours. You hit rush hour, it could take you 3 hours to move 10 miles. Elon Musk is digging a tunnel. Uber's looking at autonomous drones. They don't know it. I mean, there is a lot of risk there. They don't know if people are going to use it. They don't know what they're doing in terms of the FAA, the regulations, how this is going to work. They just don't know. So they're experimenting with different areas. And this Horizon 3, it becomes really important, really Horizon 2 and 3, when we start looking at adding and evaluating new features, new technologies, and in the things that we're looking at, okay? So to that point, Eric Ries, the creator of the book, the author of the book, The Lean Startup, he also has The Startup Way. He asked this question: what if we found ourselves building something that nobody wanted? In that case, what did it matter if it was on time or on budget? If you've ever interviewed someone and they've been talking about maybe their project management expertise, I have yet to find someone that says, oh, I delivered over budget and not on time. Pretty much everyone that I've ever met says they deliver on time and on budget. Now, first of all, we know that's not true. And second of all, great, you delivered on time and on budget. But what was the outcome? Not the output. What was the outcome? Did the customer consume it? Did they use it? Did they like it? Was it good? Was it a good business decision on your part to produce this thing? Was it profitable? Did it add to the enterprise? There should be an exchange of value, and that's what happens at the end of the value stream. On the operational side, there is an exchange of value, and the value is, hey, you paid us and we delivered to you a product. Amazon, for instance, right? We ship a product to someone's door, we bill their credit card. Boom. What did the person get? The exchange of value was they got the product. What did Amazon get? They got paid, right? They became profitable. So those things are kind of important. So being on time, on budget, not important unless people are actually going to use this. So the most basic returns that we can measure on this is the benefit divided by the investment cost. That's the most basic form of return on investment. And there are many other types of metrics that have been financial instruments, financial indicators that they've developed to be able to work in this manner between the return on investment versus the investment cost. Return on investment indicators, however, are lagging indicators. We don't really find this out until the very end of things. It could be profitable. It might not be profitable. We just don't know. We typically make a calculation in the beginning and it says, based on this amount of risk, based on this discounted cash flow, this is the amount of profit that we expect to make. Those calculations are pretty much mandated and required by finance people in your organization. Okay. Well, how do we know that it did that? Well, hopefully at the end, they're checking that stuff and they're improving upon those. Often it's not. Here's the other problem. The risk that people have said that they identified is based on homogeneous systems, meaning we built these for singular manufacturing environments. These things were built in a time in the 40s and 50s and 60s when we were just cranking out automation. I mean, there wasn't anything about software or anything like that. We were producing widgets, producing fenders on a car, brake systems, all of that kind of stuff. So those were predictable because off of the assembly line would roll these parts. And we knew from monitoring that, out of 100 parts, 5% of them would be defective and have to go back into the system. So we could quantify that risk and say, okay, this is valuable for 5% of the systems. I'm sorry, it's 95% efficient. There's 5% waste that we have to deal with at the end of that. So pretty good returns on those things. These today, your ROI indicators are typically based on this kind of crystal ball calculation, meaning we make some assumptions up front that we know how things are going to go based on our experience, based on our interaction with different risks. Well, we've done projects before, and typically when we do projects of this type, these things take about this long to do, and blah, 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 all of which are usually wrong. And the reason they're usually wrong is because we don't work in manufacturing. Most of us don't. We work on complex systems, software systems. We work in cyber physical systems, hardware systems. And so we're not using the same system before. We're not creating widgets. We're not creating an assembly line. And so we really don't know. And no, these projects are not exactly the same as the one before it. These are different. There's always different things and different features that they put to it. So bottom line is we can't use those. Other things are, these are not flow-based metrics. They're talking about, here's my return. This is what this is my idea of profitability. This is my investment. This is what I expect to make on it. And most of them are based on projects. Projects are antithetical to flow. They are not flow-based. Projects are one and done. Projects are stop, start, continue. So we don't want to do that. We want to do this by value streams. And indeed, we do want to fund by value stream as well because they are flow-based things. What's another example of non-flow based? Well, think if you're Apple, okay? You're Apple and you have these things called iPhones, okay? Great. So we're making an iPhone. What's the probability that the next iPhone, whatever it is, 13, 14, 15, that it's going to have a camera on it? Pretty big, right? It's probably going to have a camera. We don't know what kind of camera it's going to have, but we don't need a project for that. We know it's going to have a camera. If you're Ford and you're making brakes for cars, you have a value stream that produces brakes. You don't care which car it's for. Somebody does at some level, but if you're the ones developing the brakes and putting in the software and doing all that kind of stuff, you don't really care. You're just looking at which feature goes to what. You don't need a project for brakes. You know all the cars are going to need brakes. And as I said, value streams are long-lived going concerns. They're not projects. They're not one and done. So how long are people going to buy brakes? I don't know, until they don't want to stop anymore. So the value stream continues until your customers no longer want to consume that product. So these will continue to have cameras on them until your customer base says, I don't really care about that anymore. I now want holograms. Okay, well, let's do something different then. And also it's difficult to quantify this stuff for strategic jobs. Meaning, let's suppose you want to compete in China and you know it's going to be a losing proposition. You are going to lose money. Well, no person in their right mind would do that because it's going to have a negative ROI. But you would do that if you don't have a footprint in China and you need one to compete. So these don't work for this, for strategy, because it just gives you a negative number and you're like, well, I guess we're going to lose money by a lot. So the business does require, business agility actually does require certain things. So predictability at scale anyways, we require predictability, not productivity, predictability. Productivity is nice, but if it's not making you money, if you're not doing anything with it, it's not all that important. Predictability, on the other hand, is important. Why? Because we don't do hippie agile here. That's not what SAFe is about. Hippie agile, you know, there's people in the 60s and 70s. Hippie agile was more along the lines of, hey man, I don't know what you're going to get. You'll get what you get when you get it. You'll find out in 2 weeks. All right. At the end of 2 weeks, we'll let you know what you're getting. Businesses cannot run that way. Ford needs to know that they're going to have automobiles ready to ship to their dealerships in August. They have to know that. And those things have to be there. Apple, I used to work for Apple. Apple, they are very draconian about their features. Apple says, thou shalt have a phone in September. And by God, there will be a phone in September. Now, the way they do that is they're very draconian about the features involved. And if the feature is not ready for prime time by September, they will kill it. Even if it's the most important feature there, they have to have the phones to the Christmas markets. So predictability is key. Predictability is money in the bank. When you can count on something, and more importantly, your customers can count on you to deliver on time, that's money in the bank. Far more important than productivity, far more important. Fast feedback loops, we know why those are important. We get the data faster, we can make changes faster. That gives us the ability to pivot or persevere. And it gives us lean agile budgeting, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So we have to know how to handle this way of budgeting as well. So these are all inputs to the thing we call the innovation accounting framework. Innovation accounting framework lives in the portfolio level of SAFe, which is why we kind of talked about the portfolio level. It was created and pioneered by Eric Ries. It says the innovation accounting framework, and you'll hear the lean startup is another term. This is not just for startups. It's actually for big businesses as well, large enterprises. So don't let the name fool you. There is a hypothesis portion of this. So it uses a scientific method. We produce an MVP, or minimum viable product. So we'll talk about how to do that. Eric says tune the engine. Tune the engine means we produced an MVP. What did we learn? How do we adapt to that? How do we adapt to the learning of that? Can we adapt to the learning? In some cases, we may not be able to do that, and it becomes a sunk cost, and we just need to move on to something else. Do we pivot or do we persevere? In other words, should we invest our money into something else? Should we modify our MVP? Should we modify our eventual product based on the information we're receiving? Or should we just continue? Are we heading in the right direction? We need to know these things, and we need to know that early, hence the fast feedback. To do that, we call this most people are familiar with this as the PDCA cycle. So plan, do, check, adjust. Used to be plan, do, check, act. It's now plan, do, check, adjust. It was invented by a guy, I think the guy's name was Walter Schubert. And so he invented this. This is often attributed to Edwards Deming, but he wasn't the inventor of this, but he gets credit a lot of the times. In the lean startup, they call it a build, measure, learn. It's the same thing. PDCA cycle, build, measure, learn, whatever. The idea is very, very fast. The idea is we gather information, we analyze that information, and then we make decisions based on that information. So it's got to be real scientific data gathering. Let's talk about the pieces here. For the purposes of the innovation accounting framework, the lean startup cycle, these in SAFe require the use of what's known as an epic. Now, if you're not familiar with SAFe and you just happen to be an Agilist type person, I said the word epic, you would just say, oh, epic, yeah, that's like this big giant story. And it still is. The difference is in SAFe, the epic is huge. It goes bigger than what we call a program increment, which is an 8, 10, or 12 week chunk of time. And so the epic would be something that is bigger than that. The epic is about as close to projects as we get in SAFe, but they're not projects. They're typically not one and done kinds of things. They're things that add value to our solutions, and we build them in our value streams. There's 2 types of epics. So there's the business epics, those are the customer facing ones. And then there's enabler epics, which are more on the technical side of things. But they both need to be evaluated. And they're both there to get equal opportunity to be in the backlog. Portfolio epics that are at the large that we're going to be talking about here, those are typically cross-cutting, meaning they might involve more than one value stream. All epics at the portfolio level have to have what we call a lean business case and definition of an MVP, and it's got to have an owner, a shepherd, someone that is has a vested interest in seeing this epic get done. Why do we do all this stuff? Because epics are big, and you can, if you get things wrong in there, you can cause some significant economic damage to your business. These are big things that require a lot of time, a lot of resources, a lot of people to do the work on them, so they're expensive. So we should be sure that we're spending our money correctly. Our shareholders demand that. Our CEO, that's the CEO's job, is to make sure that we're creating wealth for our shareholders. So we need additional fiduciary validation here. So that's why we produce the lean business case, the MVP, and this evaluation. So how does this look like? Well, we have, what does this look like? We have a template, and this template really works pretty well with the lean startup or innovation accounting framework. And so it's broken into these parts. The value statement. And so this describes this in general terms. This template, the for, who, the, is, a, that, unlike our solution, comes from Jeffrey Moore's book, Crossing the Chasm. He uses this for his elevator pitch, but I've seen people use it for project charter. I've seen them use it for elevator pitches. I've seen them use it for hypothesis statements, other types of things. But this is what we're interested in defining. What is our hypothesis on the value that this thing is going to deliver? This is not just a title of ABC project and ABC project's going to do this. We want to know this information. So the business outcome hypothesis down here provides what type of, how are we going to measure this? Okay, you said it's going to do this. Great. It's going to do that. What do we get out of that? How are we going to measure that? Leading indicators. We need to find out if we're headed in the right direction, and we need to figure out long before all this stuff is done. Think about this. Let's say you're doing a large epic, and this epic is a year. It's going to take a year to implement the whole thing. You don't want to wait a year. Let's say we're building a website. You don't want to wait until the end of the year and find out that website is not producing the value you need. You want to find that out up front. You want to find out if people are going to use that much sooner, much quicker than what you're currently doing. So you need to have these leading indicators. Leading indicators are going to ask you to make a decision based on the data. So leading indicators should provide you sufficient information to make a decision of whether you want to continue with this, whether you want to change this, or whether you want to drop it all together and move on to something else. See, one of the fundamental things in SAFe is money allocated is not equal to money spent. So typically in most companies, you fund a project, that money just disappears. Like, okay, here's $10 million is going to take you to do this. Sure, you have to report on it and all that kind of stuff, but they never anticipate getting that money back. Like, you only did half the project and it's not really providing all that much business, all that much profitability. Kind of sucks. Let's take the rest of that money and let's put it towards something else that we think is more valuable. Most companies don't do that. They should, but they don't. Non-functional requirements, NFRs. So we talk about these. These are the ilities. These are things like scalability, about the performance that they do. Some of the areas such as, I don't know, maybe you have some ideas behind, well, we're not sure if these things are going to produce high quality, secure products. Okay, we need to have so we have to put some NFRs around that to make sure it's secure. We have to put other NFRs on that to make sure that people's response time, it comes back in the UX within half a second. All of these types of things, it's got to be modular, it's got to be scalable, that type of thing is specified in the NFRs. So how does this work? We talked a little bit about the portfolio. We're going to go into a little deeper discussion, but one of the things that we use at the portfolio level is known as a Kanban system. The reason we do that is a Kanban system does two things really, really well. Kanban comes from Lean. Again, this is another one of those things that has come out of the Toyota way. And so this is many decades in the making, but it does two things really well. First of all, it makes things visible. It's all very, very visible in that portfolio Kanban. We know what the status is at any point in time of these things. The second thing that it does is it forces capacity matching. Kanban system is a pull system. We can only pull in enough work that we have capacity to do. So the teams that are pulling this work from left to right will only be able to pull in sufficient to the capacity they have to execute. So those are the two main things that we get out of this. With that, it helps prevent unrealistic expectations because people want to know, I mean, there's metrics and things we can get out of this, and people want to know, well, when am I going to get my stuff? Well, that's detailed here. It gives you some idea in terms of some of the metrics that you're looking at, like cumulative flow diagrams and cycle time and all of that kind of stuff. It helps drive collaboration because people are going to, like I said, might want to know, hey, business owners want to know, where is my stuff? Epic owners are going to want to know, hey, what's the progress on this and how we're going to be able to do that? When am I going to get it? What do our customers think about this, et cetera? So there's a lot of these different areas, and it brings a degree of structure and analysis associated with this. So Kanbans are flow-based systems, which is another reason we don't have projects here, because they don't really make a lot of sense because projects aren't necessarily flow-based. The other thing a Kanban system has, a true Kanban systems have what's known as policies, policy states. And so policy states will tell you the different things that you need to do to get through this. Now, I'm not going to read all of these through to you, but just notice a few things about this. There is a left or right pull here. We have these standard states of a funnel, everything coming in. We have a review state, an analysis state, a backlog state, an implementation state, and a done state. So let me explain kind of the high level ways that this works. So funnel just means we'll accept everything, but at the portfolio level, these are big elements, really big elements. M&A activity, mergers and acquisitions, cost savings, marketplace changes, et cetera. Review is just that. We're taking a look at it. We calculate a weighted shortest job first that I'll talk about in a moment to get some idea of the economic value of this. We have an analysis, which is where we do the lean business case. And we refine our understanding of weighted shortest job first, and then the portfolio backlog. If it makes it all the way through these steps and into the portfolio backlog, are you guaranteed to work on this? Nope. If it's in the backlog, it has a chance to get done. If it's not in the backlog, it has no chance to get done. Good news, though, you're not going to be bothered with a lot of people coming in and going, what's the state of this? How come it's not higher? All of this stuff, all of the quantifications, the business case, the weighted shortest job first, all of that is transparent. They can see why that is. If you do pull in an epic and you start working on it, then we have some decisions to make. Based on our leading indicators, we have to make a decision. We build the MVP, and do we persevere or not? Do we call it done? Or do we take that money and spend it somewhere else? So these are decisions that we have to make, and this takes place in the implementing side. It's done when one or two conditions happens. One, we have completed all of the features associated with this epic, right? So if you look back on this slide here, epics get broken down into features, features get broken down into stories. So this is the overall taxonomy of what we're looking at. So when we take an epic and we're in the analysis phase and we start to break it down into features and we write our lean business case, if we're going to continue implementing features, great, we persevere. If we're done implementing all the features we had, then the epic's done. Or if it's no longer a concern for the portfolio, meaning what? Well, meaning that we've done about as much work as the portfolio cares about, and now it's going to be decentralized and pushed down to the Agile release trains and some value stream, and it's their issue to decide when that's enough. Well, when is it enough? Well, it's enough when weighted shortest job first tells us it's enough, or our customers tell us it's enough. So how does that work? When we put this all together, yeah.
There's a question from Sharu asking about the portfolio Kanban and WIP limits.
Yeah, so let's kind of talk about that. There is no WIP limit on the funnel. There is WIP limits in the review state. So this will be typically a little bit larger. And there are WIP limits, a little smaller WIP limits on the analyzing state. Portfolio backlog is WIP limited by these two preceding upstream stages. These are going to put it into here. This does not have a WIP limit, an explicit WIP limit. It's sort of WIP limited by way of the review and analyzing. Implementing MVP, persevere, yeah, because these can very often be asynchronous activities. And as a result of that, there should not only be WIP limits here, probably some ready buffers to actually make it easier to do the asynchronous part of that. So hopefully that sort of addresses the question. If you really want to do this the right way as a true Kanban, it should have WIP limits, and it should also have a class of service associated with it. So it would be a true Kanban system implementation. So we're not talking about Scrumban or anything like that. Okay.
Joe, another question.
Yeah.
Sorry for that. When you speak about done from portfolio perspective, you mentioned a very important point, which is it's not interest of the portfolio. It's not really about proving the hypothesis of MVP. So how we can marry that with what we're seeing now on the lean startup cycle?
Yeah, so let's talk about that. So let's step through it. So we have this Kanban system that I just showed you. And we have an epic coming out of the Kanban system. Now notice this epic has an approved lean business case with a defined MVP, epic hypothesis, the whole thing. So we've done the WSJF. It's passed through these stages. It's passed through these stages, and we're here. We're in the MVP persevere stage. So we've said, yep, it's in the backlog. Yep, we have capacity. Yep, it's high enough. Let's pull it in. But what are we actually pulling in? We're only going to build the MVP, the minimum viable product. We are not going to build the entire epic. Why? Epics are expensive. We're going to spend a lot of money on that. We do not want to spend a ton of money on things that may not be valuable. So we're going to build a small portion of that. And the small portion, it needs to do one thing. It needs to help us make a decision. And the decision is, did we prove our hypothesis? Yes? Great. We're heading in the right direction. So we should persevere. We should continue to develop more features for this. Okay, for how long? Well, until WSJF says we don't need to develop any more features, or perhaps our customer says no more, or perhaps we've done enough work here, as it says, if portfolio governance is no longer required. In other words, we're in this state, we've said, yeah, it proves the hypothesis, all is good. You know what? I think the budget of this train or trains in this value stream, they have enough money to continue to work on this. They can do it in their local context. The portfolio no longer needs to be involved. We do not need to monitor this. Remember, SAFE uses decentralization. These guys have bigger things to work on. By the time you start building an MVP, by the time that you start building more and more features out of that, there's going to come a point where the portfolio just isn't going to care about it anymore. They're going to have other stuff that they're working on, and the development will continue, but it's going to continue in the local context of an Agile release train or multiple Agile release trains, a solution train as the case may be, in other areas, and the portfolio is not going to really care about it. Now, does that mean that there's no monitoring? No, that doesn't mean that. Of course, there's monitoring. Of course, there's metrics. We don't just give people money and then walk away from it and hope it works out. There are guardrails that we put around to make sure that people are executing within the environment that we have. We set the correct environment for people to operate in. And so if the portfolio doesn't care about it anymore, then it can move to the done state from the portfolio. It will not be in the done state in the Agile, in the solution or program Kanban level that it got pushed down to. If we have not proven the hypothesis, we have to make another decision. If the hypothesis is not proven, we have to use the data that we have in our leading indicators to make a different decision. And our decision is, are we going to pivot or are we going to stop work? Stop work means we have better things to spend our money on. This is dead and we're moving on from it. Pivot means, there's some useful enough stuff here. We've gotten some feedback from our customers, but maybe not in the original form we thought it was going to be. So let's change the hypothesis. Let's create a new epic and start over again. So it goes back into the portfolio Kanban and goes through that Kanban stage again to see if it makes sense for us to do. That's the implementation of Eric Ries's lean startup in here, otherwise known as sort of the innovation accounting framework, although the innovation accounting framework has a few extra things in it that we're going to talk about in a moment. Okay. All right. So as Dean says, small batches go through the system more quickly and with less variability, which fosters faster learning. Meaning what? We don't want to build this big, huge thing. Epics are big. Epics are expensive. Epics can cause a lot of economic damage if we're not careful with it. Down here, when we start to get to this point of where the epic is a small batch size. It's a small set of features of the overall epic. So we're building a small chunk of this, and we're going to use the information to determine what we do next in terms of the hypothesis, or if we're going to pivot to something else. So we do this in very small batch sizes to get the information that we need. So if we apply lean economics to this, right? This is one of my favorite quotes from friend, mentor, author Don Reinertsen in his book, Principles of Product Development Flow. If you haven't bought that book, if you haven't read that book, you are really missing out on something. And his quote is, well, you may ignore economics, economics won't ignore you. So you could do wacky stuff like, we've already invested $1,000, or sorry, we've already invested $1 million in this epic or this project. Let's just keep putting money in. Not if the economic data is telling you to stop doing that, right? But people do that anyways. They ignore economics, and then economics comes back to bite them. Unfortunately, most entities that we deal with are doing a lot of non-economic based prioritization of their work. These are some of the more popular ones. The first one you've all probably experienced. This is what's known as the HIPPO. HIPPO is the highest paid person in the organization. It's an acronym. That's what it stands for. Meaning what? Meaning the senior VP said we should do this project. Therefore, we're going to do this project. Why? Because the HIPPO said so. Is it the best economic made decision? I don't know. We should evaluate that in the form of economics, not based on the person's position in the organization. They should all use the same mechanism to evaluate these initiatives. Whether they're projects or epics is irrelevant. Squeaky wheel. This is typically sales or marketing. The person that yells the loudest makes the biggest promise of revenue. If you build this for me, we'll make $1 billion. Or if you don't build this for me, we'll lose our biggest customer and we'll lose $1 billion. Is that true? I don't know. What data do you have that says that? Well, the guy I talked to said that. Well, does the guy that you talked to at that company, is he the one that controls the purse strings? No. Well, then he probably can't make that promise. And then LIFO or FIFO. A lot of people just set up a queue and they start working through a queue, either in a last in or first in, first out kind of way. This leads to more WIP. This leads to poor economic visibility and generally makes bad decisions. In short, this is intuition. Intuition from Don Reinertson's study, and all of the math and statistics are in his book. You're about ready to make a 70% wasteful mistake. Intuition is wrong about 70% of the time. So it's not real good to go in that direction. So what Reinertson tells us is if we're only going to quantify one thing, we should quantify the cost of delay. So we need to prioritize based on lean economics, which means we need two things. Excuse me. We need either what is the cost of delay in delivering the value, and what is the cost to implement the valuable thing. So these are the economic impacts that we need to build sensitivity around in the very beginning. So how does this work? Well, as I said, there's a bit of math in Reinertson's work. If you like calculus, you're going to like Reinertson's book because he does go through a calculus proof here. And essentially, it's very simple. It's the area under the curve. So it's the economic derivative of what you're looking at. So when we look at prioritized weighted shortest job first, when you look at what Reinertson talks about, he says, well, weighted shortest job first is made up of cost of delay divided by duration. Weighted shortest job first is Don Reinertson's term. However, it's important to know that this economic calculation has been around for a long time, many decades. This was originally done in the lean Toyota way of things, and it was called CD3. CD3 stood for cost of delay divided by duration. So those are the 3 Ds. So 1C, 3D, CD3. Reinertson coined the term weighted shortest job first, which makes a lot more sense. And so there we have it. Cost of delay divided by duration. Now, in SAFE, we use proxy variables. Don Reinertson uses the real variables. And in order to really calculate this and do the required sensitivity analysis, it's going to take a while to build the financial model to do that. SAFE says we've got a quick, easy way of doing that by essentially saying, here's our proxy variables. And we'll talk more about what those proxy variables are. But essentially, weighted shortest job first is simply the cost of delay divided by the duration. How does this work? Well, it's about the prioritization of the work that we're doing. And in this case, the weighted shortest job first is saying that with the highest cost of delay, highest weighted shortest job first is always the first one to do. So it goes A, B, and C. So if we do it in that order, A, B, C, we have the least area under the curve, and we have the best economic outcome. Or we could do it the opposite way, CBA, in which case we'll have the most area under the curve and the worst cost of delay calculation. Now, I had an enterprising student in one of my classes who said, "Hey, Joe, is this really true?" I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Well, I'm looking at this graph and I'm seeing, let's see if I can draw on this. Drawing is always kind of fun. And I'm seeing something that looks like this. And, you know, at time t, at the very end here, they're all done. Doesn't matter where we went A, B, C, or CBA. They're all done." And I said, you're right. At the end, does it really matter what order we went? Because at the end, that's all good and done. We've delivered all three of these features, no matter which direction we went. But then I asked a different question. And I said, let's suppose we're in the lean startup. And as doing the lean startup, and as doing the lean startup, we have decided to do this in such a way where, where's my mouse? You know what? I'll clear all this out. I'll go this route. What if we did it this way? And we said, I should probably bring this over this way. Can't really tell what I'm drawing on. Something like this, right? Or something like this. That's a little bit better. Okay, so if we stopped it here, and again, I'll try and, I'm having just a dickens of a time with my mouse. Okay, so if we stopped it here, and we brought this line all the way up, and we brought this line, all the way up through here, in this area, if we stopped here, we would still have delivered A and B, the first two highest priority items. We would not have delivered anything in the bottom one. So yes, prioritization does matter. The order in which we do things, the economic viability of the way we're doing things is ensured to give us the greatest chance of profitability. So it doesn't really make any sense to walk it all the way through when you're doing it that way. So, you know, if you drew the line here, that's all that means. So weighted shortest job first helps us decide what priority we should do these things. The components of cost of delay. So we talked about, you know, well, what is cost of delay? We mentioned the term, we didn't define it. In SAFe, there are three proxy variables that we use for cost of delay. User business value. So what is the value to our user? What's the revenue impact? How much money are they willing to spend? Do they want this over that? Will they choose it over our competitors? Time criticality. Is there a fixed deadline? In other words, what happens if we deliver late? Are we the only ones? Do we have a natural monopoly or something and the customer doesn't care, or they're going to have to wait regardless because we're the only game in town? I don't know. Will we get fined if we're late? Is this a high assurance or compliancy type of thing where if we don't file within this amount of time, we get penalized for that? Risk reduction or opportunity enablement. Risk reduction means sort of like an enabler. We're reducing the risk of a future delivery. We're paying some of that down. Or there's an opportunity in enablement, meaning we didn't originally intend for this to be used here, but it is able to make us additional money in those different areas. I think, Mark, in the last one, I came up with a great example for opportunity enablement. Now I don't remember what it was, but I will say this: pretend you're opening a warehouse in China, and it just so happens that's brand new for you, and you have warehouses in other areas of Asia Pacific, let's say India. And it just so happens that complying with the rules and regulations of India automatically enables you to open warehouses in China as well. I know, an extreme example, but that would be opportunity enablement. Hey, we targeted India. Well, it turns out China wants that too. Cool. we get more money. So that's what those things are. So those three variables, in Reinertsen speak, this would probably be 15, 20, 30, 40, 100 variables, okay? Calculating weighted shortest job first. Why do we use it? So we use this because it's quick, it's easy, and it's relatively accurate. For duration, we also use a quick proxy. We use job size. So this is giving us some idea of how long is it going to take to build the implementation. Is this always a good idea using these proxy variables? Probably not. There's probably times where it doesn't make sense and you want to use the real variables, job size, for instance. As a proxy, you may say, this is going to take, 3 months to do, 4 months to do, 5 months to do, something like that. Maybe it is, but if there's a constraint on the system that's going to take you longer because there is this constraint, like, I don't know, you're producing a data center that has to be, blessed by the government or the Department of Defense or something, and they just have a time period and you can only get this done once a year. Well, that job size is going to help. The job size is going to be huge now because it's 1 year. You've got a shot to do this. So it's only once a year. So we use it because it's a flow-based system. We use it because it's easy to understand and it's pretty fast and there's enough math behind it. It routinely prioritizes and updates whenever we have new information or we get to a program increment, a PI boundary, we'll recalculate it. Unlike what people do with net present value or payback or IRR or MIRR or these other financial indicators, they typically do it once, say, yeah, this is how much money we're going to make, and then they walk away and you never see it again. This is constantly updated. It's constantly updated. And we get new information all the time. Remember, we're building an MVP. We get information out of the MVP, we update weighted shortest job first. And it gives preference to smaller jobs. People who want to game the system will produce stuff with smaller jobs. They actually can't game the system because other people are going to be looking at this and questioning that job size. System architects, product owners, product managers, business owners, all these people are going to be looking at this stuff and they're bound to say, no, that's not going to take that long. It's going to take a lot longer than that. So prioritization. The other cool thing about weighted shortest job first, and this is not the case with things like net present value, NPV, or internal rate of return, or marginal internal rate of return, or payback, or any of these other ones, WSJF by default ignores sunk cost. If you look at the calculation, cost of delay divided by duration, the actual cost, the amount that you spent so far, is not in the calculation, okay? So Reinertsen's quote, take an econ view, while you may ignore economics, it won't ignore you, is paramount in this, okay? So we do not consider money already spent. Whatever we've spent up to this point is irrelevant. We can still work on something else. Money allocated is not money spent. So this enables us to work in a more serialized fashion, less of a multitasking, hey, work on this, then work on that, then work on this. How does this work? Let me walk you through an example of this. So we're going to have an epic hypothesis. We're going to talk about business outcomes and MVPs, and then we're going to talk about leading indicators versus vanity metrics, okay, and non-functional requirements. So let's take an example hypothesis statement. And even though this is an example, I'm going to give you what happened in real life. From a company that I worked at. So for who, the, is a, that, unlike our solution. For American Airlines members and guests who want to purchase airline tickets, the AA.com is a website that provides the ability to purchase tickets, search for flights, manage upgrades, check in for flights, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Unlike Delta Airlines, our solution actually works. Now, unlike Delta Airlines, our solution processes electronic ticket refunds, something that our competitors do not do. So that's a differentiator there. Well, what problems do we have? We are not going to build the entire epic hypothesis. We're not going to build the entire website. I do not want to spend $10 million and a year's worth of time of my best engineers to build something that people are not going to use or that they think sucks. I want to find out ahead of time. And building it because our competitors have it is not sufficient. It's not an economic justification. So what are our outcomes? Why are we doing this? Well, the majority of our ticket sales will occur during website. What do they do now? Well, in the olden days, in the 90s, we used to have to go to call centers and pick this stuff up. They had little outlets and they'd have to print or they'd mail it to you, the actual hard copy tickets. Call center volumes. So we want people to be able to get this electronically. We want to shift the burden to the customer so that it'll be a pull mechanism where the customers are now doing most of the work rather than the ticket agents. And then we want to make sure that call volumes are being decreased because that volume of calls should start to go down and down and down. And we think ultimately the customers, the NPS experience for our customers is going to be better. Leading indicators, we expect to see our call center volume go down and we'll expect to see purchases ramp up. Now, this is kind of an end state. We won't know that until we have most of this stuff done. And as far as two-factor authentication for logins is going to be required for security and PCI compliant credit card stuff to accept that. Okay, so this is the hypothesis. Now we need to prove the hypothesis using this information. So here's where you got to be a little bit careful. Lagging indicators make us feel good, but they tell us nothing. Okay, they don't help us make the decision, the pivot or persevere decision, which is what we need from the leading indicator. They don't provide information about that. They don't provide information about the success or the failure of the initiative. They don't help with our pivot or persevere. Examples of lagging indicators or vanity metrics, velocity. Velocity is a lagging indicator at the team level. It's not really happening until the very end. That's when you find out. Raw page hits. We can't go and build a website and then go, wow, 10 million people hit our website. We're a success. No, you're not. That doesn't tell you anything. The only thing it tells you is that 10 million people looked at your website. Think about this. I bet on your smartphone right now, you have apps that you've downloaded that you've never opened. So if we were using raw page hits and views, we would say, oh man, this is great. 10,000 people downloaded our app. 1 million people downloaded our app. So what? Are they using it? If you married that data, the number of downloads with how long people are actually using it, now you've got something. So leading indicators should help us answer two questions. Are we making progress on our outcome hypothesis? And how do we know that? Those are the two main questions that we need to answer. We should get actionable information on early outcomes. So we want to find out examples of this, new features based on control groups. One group has the new feature, the other one doesn't. Netflix does this kind of stuff all the time. Cohort analysis, meaning we put something out there and it's free. How many people will migrate to the paid version of this? Those are conversion rates. We need to know that information using the leading indicators. So for example, for our airline website, we might capture some of this data, which is readily available. All call centers have this kind of data. I've toured various call centers and they all track this stuff. Average call volume per day, average talk time, right? Because they don't want people to spend too much time on the phone. Turnover is pretty big. And when we start to look at this, we say, okay, we produced a site and the average call center per day is starting to go down. People are starting to they're starting to make more flight queries off of the website. The visits to the website are increased. We can gather this. And it's a leading indicator because we can gather this information every day if we want to. So we can make fast decisions. Let me give you an example of what we did. How did we build the MVP? Essentially what we did with the MVP was we said, here's an MVP. Let's build a few features. We don't want to build the whole website. So what we're going to build is we're going to build a small section of the website. We're going to limit this to only the United States at first. We're going to say, only our biggest customers, so our executive platinum customers, and we're going to give them a link and we're going to say, hey, here's all of the flight schedules for North America. Why don't you pick your flight out of this, get all the information you need, and then when you've got that information, you can have it up on a screen and talk to, call the call center and say, hey, this is the information I'm used to. Most of the time when people call in the airline call centers, it's like, well, hey guys, yeah, I'm interested in going from Dallas to San Jose. Oh, cool. Well, we have this flight, we have this flight, we have this flight. Do you want any stops in there? Because we have these flights, we have this kind of plane. Oh, this one stops here. Do you want to, on the way back, do you want an overnight? There's all these questions. They could just gather the data, call up the agent, go, yeah, I already know what flight I want. I know the times. Bring me this flight, book it, boom. They're in and they're off. And so as a result of that, things start to decrease. Your talk time starts to go down. Hey, that's giving us information. We didn't build the whole site. We built a small functional part of it that customers were asking for. So we have to ignore the sunk cost. If the data says customers aren't using this, then we work on something else. Maybe the same thing, maybe completely different. Money allocated is not money spent. Have we delivered enough value? We have to answer those questions as well. Okay, so wrapping up, you will find an advanced topic. This is an older one, so I don't think my article is on the front page of the advanced topics, but you can search in SAFE. It's called Applied Innovation Accounting. That's the name of the article. And in it, it walks you through in detail the example I gave you, as well as a cyber physical example of how we did leading indicators for a cyber physical system. This is a car that was using autonomous vehicle. They're building an autonomous vehicle. They didn't want to build the whole autonomous vehicle first. They just wanted to decide on the radar installations or LiDAR installations and what would work for them. Okay, so summary. We apply innovation accounting. And SAFE does do that very well. Fast feedback, small batch sizes are critical. We don't want to build the whole project, the whole epic. We want to build a small portion of it and get information. Multiple opportunities, milestones to analyze the data. And that's what we need to do. We need to use the data to make economic decisions. Leading indicators versus vanity metrics. Don't be swayed by vanity metrics. If it feels good and makes you think, start probing a little bit more, see if it's giving you the information that you need to make to answer those two questions. And then finally, we have to make the pivot or persevere decision. Pivot and persevere decision, I will warn you, is incredibly hard to make. Most people fail to make that decision just because it's so difficult. It's very difficult to kill their pet projects and things even though the data is staring them in the face. All right. So Mark, do we have some questions?
Thank you, Joe. So Andrew asked a question on LinkedIn. Andrew, I'm not clear about the question. If you want to unmute and just ask your question here.
Sure. It was back when you were going over the moving things from the portfolio Kanban board onto the program. I was wondering, I'm kind of having a problem with this now of where to draw the lines around epics or features. So, and when to close out that initial epic, because we're doing a lot of new work. So like, would an example be like when Apple decided to put that phone on the camera, even though I think it was an original, like after say the third model and they knew it was always going to be there, that might be when it would drop off a portfolio backlog onto a program. I was just kind of looking for a more specific example you might be able to give.
Yeah, so possibly it would depend on the dependency. There would be a function of, well, is this a brand new camera? So it's like a AR camera that was like one of our chief features. Portfolio is still probably going to want to do something about that. They're probably going to want to gather some information. So not sure about that, but if it was the type of thing where I would see that they have, let's say, I don't even know which one this is. It's the latest. What was the latest? The 12, I guess. Let's say you got a 12. And so the 12 comes out and it's got this wicked camera on it, which it does. And it takes great low light pictures and all that stuff. The maintenance on this phone, the Apple typically keeps maintaining this stuff for at least a couple of years. that might move to a different, agile release train. They might say, the camera's done. It's kind of done. We've got enough. Oh, we're never improving it. No, we're going to make some improvements here and there in the software. We might increase the shutter speed, and we think we can tweak the low level lighting a little bit more. It's not really a portfolio concern. They're not making major investments. So they would probably drop something like that down to a program level or solution level, and the portfolio would just say, you guys handle that. If you decide you need more money, come back and see us for some reason. But for right now, you have enough to do that in your regular day-to-day work. I'm not sure if that answers your question or not.
I think that gives me a general idea. I guess we've implemented a few features that were Epic level, took multiple PIs, and we're just kind of getting into safe with this particular client.
Yeah. When
to turn it off and just go to like, okay, this is a new feature of this major thing that we gave you, but the major thing that we gave you is there and working. Do we turn that off and then we just put features on the back log at that point? Or kind of when to close the Epic and just start features that are related to that Epic, but not necessarily part of that initial Epic? Where's that line? I guess is something I'm having a problem with currently.
Those things could be pushed down to the program or solution area. The biggest thing that you can do to help you out with that at the portfolio level is actually create a definition of done for your portfolio level initiatives. In other words, you may have something that comes in as an epic, and then you find out that epic really only concerns a single value stream, or it really only concerns a single train. In which case, the portfolio is mainly in the cost-cutting stuff. They might just push that entire epic. It got broken down into features in the analysis phase. They might just take those hunk of features and throw it down to the program level if it only concerns a single train, and just populate that backlog with the features. But your definition of done will help you there, and you'll decide what does it mean to be done with a epic. When is it no longer a concern for the portfolio level? So try that.
That's fine.
We have two questions, one from Teresa and one from Cheryl. So Teresa, do you want to start?
Sure. Hi, Joe. Teresa Reynolds here.
Hey, Teresa.
Hi. So my question is around funding the value stream, and I might be able, in my question, to also help you to answer, I think, Sharu's question as well. So recently, I moved from working with DoD to being a consultant, and I'm working with a pharmaceutical company. And we are helping them to fund the value stream and to visualize the work. So in that, we took them through, or we had a conversation regarding the lean portfolio management today. So this means thank you for putting on this meeting. And my question is kind of similar to Sharu's, in that you have an executive who's coming in who wants to know, I'm putting in this much money into these pharmaceuticals, and you hit the nail on the head. They're looking at lagging indicators, right? Back to back to back. What are the things that are going to tell me that these patients are doing better? But they want to know, where's my IRR? Tell me how I can use Agile to get my ROI. And I couldn't find anything, right? Because it doesn't exist, is what I'm finding, right? So how would you work with that? How do you deal with that?
Well, if I put my finance hat on, I can absolutely create a net present value or an internal rate of return or a marginal internal rate of return very easily just by looking at the discounted cash flows. And I'll pick a risk that is something that your company is comfortable with. Here's the bottom line on this. If you take, and I don't want to belabor this too, but if you take a step back and you sort of look at it, I mentioned before that these financial indicators were only created in a manufacturing state. The calculation on discounted cash flow, which is how they quantify risk, uses a variable, and you can Google this. Don't take my word for it. Uses the variable in the calculation known as beta. Beta is supposed to be correlated with market returns. That's how they quantify the risk. The problem is beta hasn't been correlated to market returns since the 1970s. The market has changed a little bit since the 1970s. Therefore, you're already starting with an invalid calculation. The variable, the constant, sorry, that you use is no longer valid. Now, the finance bodies have said that they're eventually going to re-baseline that. I don't know when that's going to happen. It hasn't happened in the last 40 years, so I'm not optimistic about it. But if I were to put my finance hat on, I could absolutely invent you a net present value or an IRR or MIRR. What do I mean by invent? Well, it's inventive because these calculations make no sense. Sure, they consider the time value of money, but that's only as it pertains to discounted cash flows. MIRRs, IRRs, NPV, payback are all useless unless you're also doing a sensitivity analysis on it. Meaning what should normally happen, and the way this should normally work, is I have a net present value, and then I do a sensitivity analysis on the hurdle rate or the risk, the discounted cash flow that I'm using to determine if that is valid. What happens if I deliver late? What happens if I deliver early? What happens if my suppliers can't get here in time? What happens if I miss my FDA compliance? Those things are the sensitivity analysis that should be done. Cost of delay makes that easier to do that. In the talk that I did at the last Safe Summit, not the last Safe Summit, the last one that we had in person with Don Reinertsen, we actually gave a mechanism for building a quick financial model. And that's what this thing really is it's a financial model which takes into account sensitivity analysis. There's two things that you need to look at. The cost of delay will help you immensely, and the weighted shortest job first. Those things will help you immensely. The other thing you need to look at is how often those things are being recalculated and reintroduced, because things change over time. So coming up with an MIRR is pretty much useless if A, you don't do the sensitivity analysis, and B, you don't recalculate that based on any new information you find. The other problem is, as I mentioned before, the third and final problem with those calculations is that it does not give you, it does not ignore some cost, which you should. Cost of delay does all that stuff. Furthermore, according to Reinertsen's research, only 15% of the companies, i.e. your competitors, are using cost of delay and weighted shortest job first. So by you using it, you potentially gain an 85% advantage over those people that are doing that kind of work by not using IRRs and that kind of stuff. So the proof is really about making sure they understand what cost of delay is and what the advantage is and how quickly it can tell you these things. Now, when you're doing, like, say, pharmaceutical stuff, sure, you don't have the actual drug, the injection, the pill, whatever, until the very end. But I'm willing to guess, I'm willing to bet that you guys don't just produce a medication and go, wow, looks like this is going to work. Let's inject somebody and see what happens, right? That's probably not what you do, right, Teresa? There's probably a little bit more scientific due diligence that comes up along that, right? I mean, it might be simulations that you might run. It might be animals. You're going to see how it interacts with blood types. That's information, periodic information. And if you can craft some leading indicators around that, that's probably going to tell you if you're heading in the right direction or not. This gives you the mechanism to essentially say, no, the data is saying we're not heading in the right direction. And we need to either cancel this or completely refactor it in one way, shape, or form.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. So I guess in some way I could probably turn around and say, in the same manner that we taught you to maximize work not done, we want you to understand how to maximize money not made.
Correct. Here's the problem that you'll run into, Teresa. Most accounting and finance departments have no idea how to claw money back, meaning when you finance a project or an initiative, they assume that money's gone, right? Okay, it's the beginning of the year, it's the beginning of this project, here's your money, it's $10 million for the year, bye. Let us know when you're done. Give us your standard reporting metrics. But they typically don't come in there and use some kind of rolling wave planning where 6 months later they go, I'm not really seeing what I thought I was going to see. Let's kill this and let's take the money that we were going to spend on that and invest it in something else. Here's the good news. The slowest moving organization on planet Earth, known as the United States federal government, is actually starting to embrace this. They are actually starting to embrace this. We have customers that are in the federal government, like Department of Homeland Security and other areas that are doing a lot of Agile work, and they're actually starting to embrace this. So my word, what's that?
Well, I was going to say, yes, absolutely. So I'm just coming from Perspecta. If you remember, I tried to pull you in to an LPM quite some time ago.
Yeah.
And you actually gave my SPC class. So I'm glad to see you again. But, at the end of the day, the NDIA came out and they published that article where the DoD is changing the way that they handle their acquisitions. And it's more in Agile form. So and we're probably going to see it finally get implemented, right? Maybe 5-10 years before they finally catch on. But that's because they have so many things that they have to untangle, right? There's a spaghetti noodle that needs to be untangled all the way back to how everything is funded and how the contracts are made. So thank you for that answer. I definitely have something to go home with, so I appreciate that.
Well, just a word of warning for those of us on the call that are in the commercial industry. Anytime the United States federal government is ahead of you, you're in trouble.
Joe, we were thinking the Canadian government was slower, but now we have a better one.
Impossible. It's impossible to be slower.
Okay, good to know. Sherry, does that answer your question?
Yeah, thanks, Joe, for this fantastic presentation. It partially answered my question. But I want to approach it in a different way. It's like as the coach, when I talk to my leadership, and when I want to explain this innovation accounting as a mindset, right? Even before they could jump onto it. How do you think I can take this as a mindset and approach them versus the cost accounting mindset that they possess today, especially in huge legacy organizations?
Yeah, so in Leading Safe, I didn't bring it in here because obviously this presentation was long enough, but in Leading Safe in Lesson 5 on the portfolio side, we go through an entire section on cost accounting versus funding by value streams. But I think the main the real issue that I think jumps out to finance and economic people that should be operating at that level are really, hey, would you like a way of prioritizing things by lean economics and not just flawed calculations or not just intuitions or not just other types of non-economic metrics? And hey, we can measure all of our initiatives using this, all of our features using this. The other thing from a mindset portion, most of them get it that there are better ways to measure this. They get the flaw in the calculation. I think another area that gains advantage, but leadership struggles, is this whole idea of decentralization. They kind of like, okay, we're giving money to this train, this value stream, rather, that this train resides on, but how do we know that they're really going to use it wisely? Well, you kind of got to trust them, but like Reagan used to say, trust but verify. So one of the things that you can do is you can set up these guardrails around it, but they have to understand what the point of the decentralization is. And the point is, if you're at the program level, your worst case, if you're at the team level and your product owner screws up, your economic damage is relegated to an iteration size. It's 2 weeks. It's nothing. If you screw up at the program level or at the solution level, your economic damage is limited to that one increment. But if you screw up at this level, at the portfolio level, you're talking earnings per share now. The attention of those people need to be at that level, and they need to be making the right decisions at that level. And the only way you can know you're making the right decisions at that level is if you're getting fast, frequent feedback. So, you know, how do you want to do this? It's their choice. Do you want to build something small, get some information around that so that we can deliver better, more valuable stuff to our customers? Or do you want to just use intuition and hope that the thing we're going to have at the end is going to be what the customer wants? And I've heard some crazy explanations around that. Like, well, we have requirements and we just got to meet the requirements. That's what they're paying us for. If you meet the requirements, your best case scenario is the customer will get what's written. But is that what the customer wants? Probably not, but because the requirements were written long ago and those were the first things. And since that time, things have changed. You've learned stuff, the customers learned stuff, the market has learned stuff, things change. So we have to be able to adapt to that. These financial indicators like cost of delay, where did shortest job first? This type of sensitivity that we do here, you're much more likely to get, you know, value using these methods than anything else. That's not pontificating. That's straight out of Reinertson's research.
So Joe, I just need to confirm my learning here. In your slide, and I ask you that when we get to Lean Startup, you mentioned that Epic is done from the portfolio in different ways, and one of it when the portfolio get enough out of it and decentralize it. So the portfolio keep an eye on the Epic until they get their minimum value or the highest value they got to, or they decentralize it regardless of the outcome.
So you're talking about this one?
The one before, yes. So
this
the
one
before also, yes, here. When we say done, the state of done here, you mentioned that there's 3 ways of done. I'm just confirming my learning here. So
this is done when an LPM governance is no longer required, i.e. it's not a concern at this level, or we've completed everything.
So concern mean they achieve the value, or they see the hypothesis is proven, right? And then they decentralize it to the teams. Correct.
They see the work being done towards the hypothesis. The leading indicators are letting them know that the thing that the hypothesis that they had is being proved, and they can decentralize that to a train or a solution train and let those guys worry about it. They're not going to continue doing that. That also means that whatever funding, whatever money that they have here, they believe that there is sufficient money in that area, in that train or solution train, that value stream. There's sufficient money in that value stream to do the remaining work. And if there's not, that's a different conversation.
Definitely. I'll have a question about WSGF.
Sure.
Alhad, are you able to unmute and speak, or you want me to do the first? So his question is really on WSGF. If same members are not present and everyone ranking epics, do you see value in it, as it will have epic being ranked by all versus few ranked by only few bunch of members? This will lead into wrong sequencing. What has been your experience guidance around that?
So when you are estimating an epic at the portfolio level, it's done by LPM, that those 3 triangles that are involved in that. And they do the estimates at that level, which means they're probably pulling in enterprise architect, they're pulling in product management or solution management, depending on what level we're talking about there. So, and yeah, it's usually the same people that go off and do that. At a program level, the people that are doing that work are product managers, epic owners, system architects, probably if they need to bring someone in that's a specialist or something because they're missing some information, they might do that. But the teams are not involved in that, and the reason they do not do that, so it would be pretty much the same person every time. But the reason they don't do that this is because we don't know if it's going to get implemented or not. So that work at the portfolio level happens here in the reviewing and analyzing phase. We don't even know if it's going to make it into the backlog yet. So there's no reason to waste time from the teams or anything like that. This is sufficient to be done. The work is sufficient to be done by Epic owners, business owners, product managers, system architects, enterprise architects. They can do that work and it's fine. And it doesn't matter anyways, because if we move to the implementing state, so it makes it past the backlog and we've now decided, yeah, we're going to do work on this, then the teams are going to go into PI planning and they're going to use their own estimating anyways. We do not inherit the cost. We do not inherit the estimates of features or epics. We create those anew, and teams are just going to look at the feature and go, oh, okay, interesting. They're not even going to care about they care about the priority, but they're not going to care necessarily about what the estimate was on that. They're just going to break it down into stories and start estimating those stories. So they're not affected by it. But yeah, if you're not using the same people. Now, having said that, could you get the same answers by using different people? Possibly. This is a mathematical equation, so it's just numerator and denominator, right? So as long as you're using the same proxy variables and you're using the same criteria for the proxy variables, you could come up with very similar calculations, even if they're different people. But generally, yeah, I agree. You probably want the same people doing that.
Thank you, Joe. Another question from Mahendra. Portfolio team has different set of development resources. Mahendra, do you want to unmute and elaborate a little bit?
Yeah, so Joe, what I wanted to know is like we have these arts, development value streams, etc., right? They are like developing on their own, and this portfolio team is also trying to develop a MVP solution. So just wanted to know that do they have a different set of development resources?
No, portfolios actually have no development resources at all. The only thing they have at this level are epics and enablers. That's the only concern they have. Sure, there's a lot of other things that they do around budgeting and funding and all of that kind of stuff. But in terms of evaluation, it's just epics and enablers. So the real work is done either at the solution level or the program level. And when I say real work, take that with a grain of salt. The teams are really where the real work occurs. You're not going to see product managers, solution architects, system architects. You're not going to see those people writing code most of the time. That's not 100%, but most of the time they're not doing that. They're not going to be involved with DevOps, that kind of stuff. The teams, on the other hand, will be doing all that stuff. And the teams are the ones pulling from this portfolio area by way of the train and all that kind of stuff. The train pulls in the epics that they can work on, but they're not different development resources. Sure, different trains, different teams may have different expertise than other ones, and it may be the case where something in the portfolio that they want to pull in, the top thing for a certain train doesn't have a skill set match. This is all UX, and the train is a platform train, and they're building iOS. Okay, well, that's not going to help them. So they might go to a different, if they have capacity to pull something in, they might go to a different portfolio epic that has a better skill set match with them. So even when you do all of this, it still has to pass the smell test, right? We don't want to make decisions in a vacuum and go, okay, Weighted shortest job first tells us this. The portfolio Kanban tells us this. So let's just do that. That would be a mistake. You have to really say, well, does this make sense? No, it doesn't make sense for us to do this epic first because, well, there's some pretty heavy dependencies on a customer and we don't have that information yet. Okay, so, just make sure that it makes sense to you. Just because you got an answer doesn't necessarily mean that the answer, well, economically correct may not be correct from a business standpoint. Like I said, the same thing applies to like net present value. If you're trying to do a strategic acquisition or something, you're going to lose money. But you have to make sure that it meets your strategy and you're making the correct decision from a strategic point of view.
Thanks, Joe. So essentially, it means like if at all portfolio team has to build MVP, they really consume some capacity of existing art and development value streams.
Say that again. I'm not sure I understood the question.
I mean to say that if at all portfolio Kanban team has to implement some MVP, they essentially consume some capacity of existing arts and development value streams.
Oh, absolutely. 100%. So if you're in this sort of lean startup over here and you start building this epic, that epic is nothing more than the MVP, is nothing more than a collection of features. Maybe one feature, maybe 2 or 3 features, something you can get done in a short amount of time, maybe a PI or 2, something like that to prove the state, but it's the teams that are building that MVP. So it absolutely has to come from their capacity. It's not free.
Got it. Thank you, Joe.
Yeah.
Thank you, Joe. I think we consume over the time we